Greetings, financial gladiators and armchair economists. Welcome back to Boss Economics World, the only channel that treats the global economy like the high-stakes, often irrational, and wildly entertaining drama that it is. Today, we're jetting off to the economic coliseum of the Southern Hemisphere, a place where textbook theories go to die, Argentina. Grab your popcorn and your inflation calculators, because on September 18, 2025, we just witnessed a spectacle of delicious, predictable irony. The man who promised to take a chainsaw to the state, the self-proclaimed anarcho-capitalist President Javier Milei, the fire-breathing prophet of the free market who swore to abolish the central bank, just used that very same central bank to intervene in the currency market. Yes, you heard that right. After months of holding the line, Argentina's central bank, the BCRA, just sold a cool $53 million to prop up the peso. It's the economic equivalent of a vegan activist being caught sneaking a midnight cheeseburger. It's a moment so rich with contradiction, it deserves to be framed and hung in the Louvre of failed economic policies. So, what's the big deal? It's just $53 million, right? A rounding error for the Federal Reserve. But in the fragile ecosystem of Mileionomics, this isn't just a transaction. It's a crack in the dam. It's the first, desperate gasp for air from an administration that promised it could breathe underwater. Today, we're not just going to report the news. We're going to perform an autopsy. We'll go from the point, that tiny $53 million sale, to the surface, exposing the deep, systemic diseases that have plagued Argentina for a century, and how Milei's chainsaw cure might just be hitting bone. Let's dive in. Let's set the scene. Back in April 2025, as part of a desperate $20 billion deal with the International Monetary Fund, the perennial frenemy of emerging markets, Argentina established a currency trading ban. Think of it as training wheels for a free market. The peso was allowed to float, but only within a predefined corridor that crawls or widens by 1% each month. The deal was simple: as long as the peso stays within the lines, the central bank keeps its hands off. If it hits the ceiling, meaning the peso is too weak, or the floor, too strong, the bank is allowed to step in. For months, the Milei administration treated this no-intervention zone as a sacred vow, a testament to their newfound market purity. But the market, as it often does, decided to call their bluff. On Wednesday, the peso flirted with the ceiling of the band, a rate of 1,474.345 to the US dollar. According to Bloomberg, it briefly crossed it, trading at 1,474.5. Now, the government's initial reaction was classic political spin. They disputed the breach, claiming that because their official trading system only allows bids in 50-cent increments, they conveniently rounded the ceiling up to 1,474.5. So, in their world, no rules were broken. It's like telling a police officer you weren't speeding because your speedometer only shows increments of 5, and you were technically on the line. The market, unsurprisingly, wasn't buying it. The pressure was immense. Why? Because the entire narrative of Milei's Argentina is built on projecting stability. He needs to show the world, and more importantly, his own people, that his shock therapy is working. But the data tells a different story. Just weeks before crucial midterm elections, Milei suffered a humiliating defeat in a key provincial vote. His own Congress just overrode his vetoes on spending bills, signaling that his political capital is draining faster than his dollar reserves. His disapproval rating just hit a new high. Politics and economics are not separate, they are a toxic, codependent couple. New data confirmed the economy shrank in the second quarter of 2025. The promise was that after the initial pain of austerity, the chainsaw cuts, growth would magically reappear. Instead, the patient is still bleeding on the operating table. While inflation has fallen from the hyperinflationary peak of over 250% when Milei took office, it remains viciously high. Let's look at the numbers. As of August 2025, the annualized inflation rate is still hovering around a gut-wrenching 48%. This is a victory only in the sense that a Category 4 hurricane is better than a Category 5. For ordinary Argentinians, it's still a daily nightmare that erodes savings and cripples spending. Faced with this perfect storm, the peso buckled. And the central bank, despite all the free market rhetoric, blinked. They sold dollars. That $53 million wasn't just money, it was the government sacrificing a piece of its credibility to buy a few more days of calm before an election. This intervention is so fascinating because it strikes at the very heart of Javier Milei's political identity. This is a man who didn't just campaign on economic reform, he campaigned on a quasi-religious economic crusade. The rhetoric was biblical. He was going to slay the dragon of inflation. He would take a chainsaw to the political caste and their bloated budgets. His flagship policy, the centerpiece of his entire worldview, was dollarization, abolishing the peso and the central bank entirely, thereby removing the government's ability to print money and create inflation forever. It was a radical, high-risk, but intellectually consistent solution to Argentina's core problem. The chainsaw has been replaced by a scalpel, and even that seems to be shaking. Dollarization is now a distant dream, a long-term goal. The central bank he vowed to dynamite is now his primary tool for managing the currency. The free-floating exchange rate he championed is now trapped inside an IMF-designed cage. This is the classic dilemma of the revolutionary who gains power. The purity of ideology crashes against the messy, ugly wall of reality. Governing is a game of compromises, and for an ideologue like Milei, every compromise feels like a betrayal. And let's be brutally honest about the state of the treasury. The central bank is defending the peso with a ghost army. Argentina's net international reserves, the hard currency they actually own and can spend freely after accounting for liabilities, are still deeply in the red. Analysts at major banks like JP Morgan and BBVA estimate net reserves are somewhere around -$7 to $9 billion. Think about that. They are defending their currency with money they don't have. They are essentially using borrowed IMF funds and complex currency swaps to create the illusion of firepower. It's like a poker player with an empty wallet trying to bluff a table of billionaires. Sooner or later, someone is going to call, and the game will be up. As Thierry Larose at Vontobel Asset Management rightly put it, this is not a hill you want to die on. Burning these precious few borrowed dollars in a battle they are unlikely to win is fiscal suicide. This crisis isn't really about Javier Milei. He is merely the latest protagonist in a tragic play that has been running for 80 years. To understand why that $53 million intervention was inevitable, you have to understand the three chronic diseases that define the Argentine economy. At its core, Argentina's inflation problem isn't monetary, it's fiscal. For decades, the government has consistently spent far more than it earns. To cover this gap, it doesn't just borrow, it forces the central bank to print pesos out of thin air. This is fiscal dominance. The central bank isn't an independent guardian of sound money, it's the government's personal ATM. Milei's primary achievement has been to temporarily halt this process, generating a fragile fiscal surplus in early 2025. But as we saw with Congress overriding his vetoes to increase university and healthcare spending, the political pressure to turn the printing presses back on is relentless and overwhelming. The political system is addicted to spending, and the central bank is its enabler. Decades of hyperinflation, defaults, and currency confiscations have taught Argentinians one crucial lesson: do not trust the peso. This has created a phenomenon economists call original sin. The country cannot borrow long-term in its own currency. Nobody wants to save in pesos. Life savings are held in dollars, either under the mattress or in a Miami bank account. Real estate is priced in dollars. Complex business deals are negotiated in dollars. This creates a constant, structural demand for US dollars that the economy cannot meet, putting permanent downward pressure on the peso. Any sign of political or economic instability sends Argentinians scrambling to buy dollars, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of currency collapse. The unofficial blue dollar exchange rate, a true measure of market fear, is already trading at a 20 to 25% premium over the official rate, a gap that will surely widen. Enter the International Monetary Fund, the world's financial emergency room. The IMF has lent Argentina more money than any other country, with its current program being the country's 23rd since 1956. The IMF provides the dollars that keep the lights on, but it comes with strings attached, the dreaded conditionality. The trading ban that just broke was an IMF-approved mechanism. The problem is that IMF solutions are often standardized, one-size-fits-all prescriptions. They demand austerity and orthodox policy, but they can create predictable breaking points. By setting a visible ceiling for the peso, the IMF and the government essentially painted a target for currency speculators. The moment the government's commitment wavered, the market attacked that target. The IMF is both the country's savior and its jailer, providing the liquidity to survive today while imposing constraints that make long-term success fiendishly difficult. Don't make the mistake of thinking this is just a uniquely Argentine soap opera. What's happening in Buenos Aires is a hyper-exaggerated version of the challenges facing dozens of developing nations in the volatile landscape of 2025. Argentina is a canary in the global coal mine, and the air is getting toxic. Consider the parallels. For years, we watched President Erdogan pressure his central bank into unorthodox interest rate cuts, leading to runaway inflation and a catastrophic collapse in the Turkish lira. Like in Argentina, the line between political power and monetary policy was erased, with disastrous consequences. While Milei's ideology is the polar opposite of Erdogan's, the result is the same: a central bank stripped of its credibility and forced to fight politically motivated battles it cannot win. Another major IMF debtor, Egypt, was forced into a massive 40% currency devaluation in 2024 to secure a new bailout. It too suffers from a chronic shortage of dollars and a mountain of foreign-denominated debt. Its story is a playbook of what happens when a country can no longer defend its currency peg, a sudden, painful snap that vaporizes wealth and sends inflation soaring. Argentina is trying to avoid this fate with its crawling band, but it may only be delaying the inevitable. The single most important factor tormenting these countries is the U.S. Federal Reserve. With U.S. interest rates remaining elevated at around 4.5% in our 2025 scenario to combat residual inflation, capital is flowing out of risky emerging markets and into the safe, high-yielding embrace of U.S. Treasury bonds. This strong dollar environment is a wrecking ball for countries that owe debt in dollars. It makes their liabilities larger and their currencies weaker, tightening the financial noose. Argentina's struggle is a global story. It's the story of national economic policy being held hostage by global capital flows, Fed decisions made in Washington, D.C., and the unforgiving logic of international finance. The $53 million intervention has opened Pandora's box. The myth of non-intervention is shattered. The market now knows the government will bleed reserves to defend an arbitrary line in the sand. So, what happens next? As I see it, Milei's Argentina is staring at three possible paths. Scenario A, the muddle through. This is the path of least resistance. The government continues to intervene, burning through its precious few reserves. They might renegotiate with the IMF to reprofile the band, essentially devaluing the peso in a more controlled manner. They will try to limp through the midterms, hoping for a political victory that restores some confidence. This is the kick the can down the road option, but in Argentina, the road is short and full of potholes. Scenario B, the breaking point. The market smells blood. Speculative attacks intensify. The central bank's reserves run dry. One day, they are forced to abandon the band entirely, leading to a massive, chaotic devaluation of the peso. Inflation, currently at 48%, could spike back into the triple digits. The economic pain could trigger widespread social unrest, threatening the viability of Milei's entire presidency. This is the classic, tragic Argentine outcome. Scenario C, the dollarization Hail Mary. Faced with a collapsing currency and a failed policy, Milei could see the crisis as his only opportunity. He could abandon the IMF program and the peso altogether, and unilaterally declare the US dollar as Argentina's official currency. This would be an unprecedented economic gamble, a move that would instantly kill inflation but would cede all monetary control to the US Federal Reserve and could trigger an even deeper recession in the short term. It would be the ultimate fulfillment of his campaign promise, born not of stability, but of sheer desperation. So, is Javier Milei a revolutionary being tamed by the system, or a pragmatist finally waking up to the fact that his chainsaw is no match for the deep-rooted, tangled jungle of the Argentine economy? That $53 million sale wasn't just a policy move, it was a confession. A confession that even the most radical free market ideology cannot ignore the laws of political and economic gravity. In the grand casino of global finance, Argentina has once again pushed its chips to the center of the table. The wheel is spinning. We'll be here, with our charts and our cynicism, to watch where the ball lands. Stay skeptical, stay solvent. I'll see you next time on Boss Economics World.